I am Jean-Claude Verrouet. I am pleased to introduce this regional Argentine Malbec tasting guide by 5 of the top world's master sommelier and master of wine. Doug Frost, Rebecca Feynman, Case Golden, Brian Kozial, Evan Goldstein. Each of them will focus on one of the 5 different growing areas from southern region to the northern region, offering their knowledge. I have been working in Argentina for 8 years. I discovered a great diversity of terroir. Thank you for joining us and please enjoy the tasting.
Well, hello. I want to drink some Malbec today. I don't know about you, but Malbec is on the mind. And we're going to taste this Malbec in a second, but please, a little patience first. We get to enjoy the benefits of technology here by looking at my funny stereoscopic slide here of Italian workers in the fields. But these Italian workers happen to be Italian workers working in the fields in Argentina. I bring that up always because I find myself needing to explain to people that while we're focused on a specific individual spot within Argentina, and to step back a little bit and make sure we all understand, when it comes to understanding the way in which Argentine viticulture has unfolded and the way in which the place itself has adopted wine, I think it's important to imagine that it's not just that the vineyard areas, up in here, the classic areas that we talk about within Mendoza are populated by people who've been making wine there for a couple of centuries. It's that Argentina, because it was a Latin country, because it was a Spanish founded country, as we understand its history, we forget that in fact, the largest immigrant community in Argentina is Italian. And the Italians, well, you want people to drink wine. The Spanish are pretty good at it. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the Italians are even better at it. And so understanding that wine is part and parcel of the cultural life here, I think is really important. I think it's critical to understanding how it all works. Now, can we be honest? While we'll certainly talk about capital cities and cultural centers within Argentina, and Buenos Aires has its own particular milieu. Let me just explain it this way. There are a lot of jokes that you can tell in Argentina about porteños. Basically, like the dumb one I always remember is, how did the porteño decide to commit suicide? He climbed up on top of his own ego and jumped off. Okay, so the porteño, the people of Buenos Aires are considered these cultured, sophisticated, and dare we say, slightly conceited folks. But it reflects a time not that long ago, certainly in the early to mid 20th century, when Argentina was one of the wealthiest countries in the world. Certainly highly educated, very sophisticated. And so it is that our understanding of wine in Argentina, I think, needs to be more nuanced, or at least have more layers to it as we grapple with this idea of the Italians just drinking wine every day because that's what they do, and this sophisticated city where wine is coming from all over the world and is exalted and understood in many ways, I think helps us get a little bit of a grasp on how it is that Argentina is becoming much more than just Malbec, okay? And I'm not putting Malbec down. Obviously, I'm here to drink some today, but it is possible for it to become much more than Malbec, because Malbec is a wonderful everyday drinking wine for much of the 20th century, but other grapes were grown there too. Now, the primary grape for a long time was just Torrentes, the simple white that's kind of a country white, and that again reflects, if you will, this Italian heritage of wine being an everyday beverage and a nice simple drink. If you go back even further in time, if you go back to the early mid 19th century, 18th centuries, before that, wine itself in the sophisticated city centers is not at all sophisticated. So it's the mid 20th century when that changes. What were they drinking back in those days? Believe it or not, they were drinking wine that had been shipped often to Cuba, distilled down into some sort of grappa, and then shipped and then reconstituted as best they could, add water added, maybe a little bit of dehydrated grapes and things like that. Seriously, that's what they thought wine was. The people who drank real wine were the peasantry. They were the people who actually made wine and just drank it because it was illegal for them to make wine and sell it. Now, were they doing so? Oh, there's this incredible article I read once about comparing the amount of wine that was probably made and the amount of wine that the church was allowed to make for sacramental purposes. You could also sell it because, the first son becomes the business person, the second son becomes the priest, and sometimes they would do business together. And so it's a crazy article that shows how much wine was flowing through the church and being sold. And again, that was real wine. People actually had most of the time Malbecs that and other reds that they were growing and making. So fast forward all the way to today, and what Argentina has wisely done is diversified, if you will. Clearly, we've been focused in on these places, and yeah, you're going to have a chance to within this group of videos to taste Salta Malbec, which is its own thing as well. But we wanted to show you not just Patagonian Malbec, because that is its own thing too. Certainly, when we talk about Patagonia, it's a fairly complicated place. It's not just what I'm about to talk about here, not just to talk about Rio Negro and this particular spot there, and it is this larger thing, and it's varied, of course, as you would imagine. And it is certainly not as simple as just saying Patagonia. In fact, the existence of this particular winery, Wapisa, part of the Finca Patagonias group, is that it is a new spot. It's a coastal spot of Patagonia. Most of these vineyards in Rio Negro and in the other parts of Patagonia, including Chubut, are higher in elevation. They're farther up in the foothills of the Andes, and that usually works. That's why Mendoza is such a special place. It's certainly why Salta is a special place. But as other countries have learned, if you're trying to make really good wine, you need to be in a place where it's warm enough to ripen the grapes. Then you need to be in a place that's cool enough that you have, diurnal shifts, which you can get either by getting up into high elevation sites, which, okay, we get that, or by the coast. So here we are in a coastal setting when we're talking about this particular place, and so I just wanted to take a moment to do that. It helps me to look at maps. I'm that kind of guy that needs to look a little bit at maps and get a sense of where the place is itself. Wapisa is only about 25 miles from the ocean, and the Atlantic Ocean obviously has an impact, and that impact is going to be to cool temperatures off at night. But in talking with Fabian, the winemaker here, it was curious to me that when we actually started looking at those individual temperatures and talking about the difference in temperatures, they were certainly different than what you see in Mendoza, but not tremendously different. It wasn't one of those things where it was a radical shift from what was happening there. What is certainly different is the soil. Limestone clay, calcareous underpinning for vines is something we talk about all the time. We consider its importance in so much as it tends to intensify acidity in the resultant wine. And so for my little drink here today, my view and my hope as I tasted this wine initially, I mean, I've had the wine before, but every time I taste it, I come back to this idea of, right, did we keep acids? Do we have acids? Is the pH in a good place? And for me, that is what's exciting about the development within Argentina and the development with Malbec. I have to admit to an evolving understanding of Malbec I have to admit to an evolving understanding of every frickin' wine. Okay, but Malbec is not alone in that, But it is that for a long time, my view on Malbec was simply that it was a grape that didn't do particularly well in Southwest France, where it's native. I mean, most of those wines I found a bit hard, a bit intense, and tannic. And Guy Akkad is from that area, and Akkad famously was the winemaker who really promoted the idea of cold maceration, of in other words, pre-alcoholic maceration, because alcohol is a solvent. It can extract a whole bunch of stuff, including tannin. Well, we wanted to get color without tannin in order to make a good red wine, in order to soften some of those really kind of beastly wines that you saw in Cahors, the black wine, as it was called centuries ago. And so Akkad adopted this rather revolutionary method going back 30 and 40 years ago of cold maceration. Take the grapes, make them very cold, sulfur the hell out of them, frankly, was his methodology. So no fermentation is going to happen. And then just let that color soak out and hopefully some flavor as well. It worked very well for Cahors, and certainly has changed what Cahors now represents. And so I've kind of had to eat my words, because I felt like Cahors was not the best expression of Malbec, and somehow magically, mysteriously, Malbec in this high elevation, environment in Mendoza and around there could do all these wonderful things. And it wasn't a clonal thing. It wasn't even really winemaking. It was grape growing, and my theory was that it was not just this place. It was this place's altitude. When you get to higher altitude, I know it seems like a small matter to most people, but when you go from sea level to 3,000 feet, you're dealing with a different set of UV, light rays. And the grape skin is a protection. It provides protection around the seed, which is the purpose of the plant. So that the plant's trying to ripen the seed, it needs protection. Grape skins grow thicker at this higher elevation. Now, I'm saying all this just to say, here's what's really fun about the Wapisa, is that my idea goes to shit, okay? Basically, not completely, but can we be honest? It's like, okay, we know Mendoza Malbec has all this great color. Well, this is 25 miles from the ocean, and it's basically, 100 meters elevation. There's no color problem here. There's a lot of color here. All right. So maybe the I don't know. I'm just going to stop there and say, maybe I don't know. Maybe this is why I love wine, is because I'm constantly getting my hat handed to me to say, you think you know? You don't know. So we come back to this wine. Plenty of color. So clearly the grape grows in a similar fashion to Mendoza, even though it's at much lower elevation here next to the ocean. Certainly being next to the ocean, as I said earlier, I expect fierce, retention of acidity in a way that we're not going to see up in those elevated sites. Now, certainly Mendoza is getting to its cooler places, and so acidity is improving in those wines. But let's taste. And there's no question for me that this wine has, for me, distinct acidity, that it has that drying character at the end that's not drying tannins, that's not just all spice and wood and things like that. Instead, it is an issue of a cranberry note coming in here, a black cherry, but a desiccated black cherry coming in. The blueberry and blackberry notes that you expect out of Malbec are there, but it is, for me, it's a well-balanced wine and a more succulent kind of wine, Malbec, than I usually associate with the higher elevations and the more, classic areas here. The ending of the wine, for me, the finish of the wine really is succulent. I use that word in the way that something tangy makes you want to drink more. And I love that. Now, I mentioned Guy Akkad as this person who revolutionized Malbec, and frankly revolutionized Pinot Noir and some Syrahs and places like, other grapes like that in other places. This is made in a cold maceration method as well. So that may explain part of the reason why the color is so vibrant here. But I also think that we're in the Southern Hemisphere, and we know that UV light can be more intense down there. So I'm trying to rescue myself here. I'm basically trying to say, well, I was not completely wrong. I don't know. The other thing about being next to the ocean is, I don't know if you know this, but Wapisa is doing this whole crazy thing where they take this wine. They have some extra bottles of the 2017 Malbec, and they've dumped it at the bottom of the ocean. Now, I'm joking. It's only off the coast, so it's only 10, 15 meters down, but down there with the great whites and such. And talking to Fabian, he said, after 7 months under the water, it tasted distinctly different. And that's another, huh? Really? I don't know. I've tasted one wine that's been experimented with in this way. I have not gotten to taste the Wapisa that's been underwater, but it's two things. One is, why not? You're right there, so that's cool. Maybe there is a difference that can be relied upon. Two is, if nothing else, it helps us mark in our minds how distinctly different coastal Argentine Malbec can be, ought to be, and in this case, is, because coastal hasn't really been done yet. I really have been excited for a long time about wines of Rio Negro. And yes, this is very close to the Rio Negro, but it's more about being next to the ocean, whereas most of the exciting Rio Negro wines are grown near the river, but as I said earlier, quite elevated. So I am quite fond of this wine because, in general, my tendency with wines that I like to drink tend to be, get me under 14% alcohol. This is under 14% alcohol. Not that it's a magic number. It's just that if a wine is 15.5, I can't drink as much of it as if a wine is 13.9. Okay, like this wine. And I'm here to drink wine. That is a strong purpose in my life. Damn it. So thank you. Thank you for joining.